Why do some people rise to unimaginable greatness while others descend into darkness with the same power? What is this force that splits men into monsters or legends, with no path in between? If you've ever felt a deep strength within you and feared what might happen if you fully embraced it, this message is for you. Today, we confront the shadow. We uncover the truth behind power and why most men are destroyed by it while a rare few are transformed into something unforgettable. Power, like the unconscious mind, is not inherently evil nor inherently divine. It is primordial, it is ancient. And when awakened in the individual, it does not grant peace. It demands integration. You do not possess power. Power possesses you, unless you have confronted the dark within yourself first. This journey is not for the faint of heart. It is a descent into shadow, into chaos, into self, and only those who emerge with wholeness become legends. The rest, they vanish, or worse, become consumed. You've been told your whole life that power corrupts, that the desire for power is dangerous, that to want it is to risk becoming something dark. But that idea is a half-truth, and half-truths are the most dangerous of all. Power is not evil, it is not good. Power is potential. It is the raw, unshaped force within you, waiting to take form. It is like fire. It can burn a house to ash, or it can keep a man alive through the coldest winter. But the fire does not choose, you do. Most people never understand this. They associate power with those who abused it. Dictators, tyrants, manipulators. And so they fear it. They believe that to seek power is to become heartless, ruthless, or cruel. But what they're really afraid of is themselves. Because true power does not come from control over others. It comes from confronting what is chaotic and wild within your own psyche. That is where it lives, not in thrones or weapons or riches, but in the place where your unconscious stirs. Power is awareness brought to darkness, and when you touch it, something inside you changes permanently. But here's the thing: power amplifies whatever it finds. Like a magnifying glass held over the soul, it enlarges everything beneath it. There is fear, it grows. If there is anger, it burns brighter. If there is strength, not muscle, but integrity, that becomes undeniable. Power does not create character, it reveals it. And this is why it is so dangerous. Not because it destroys, but because it exposes. A man who has never faced his own cowardice, his envy, his addiction to being liked, will not be ready for power. He will believe he is strong, and the moment power arrives, it will tear through him like a storm through glass. He will grasp, manipulate, dominate. Not because power made him a monster, but because the monster was already there, hidden, undeveloped, ignored. Think of the men you've seen rise quickly, given influence, admired, even feared, and within months their lives unravel. Scandals erupt, they lash out, they spiral. Why? Because the mask they wore could not withstand the light of power, and the parts of themselves they refused to face. The shadow surfaced with brutal speed. And yet there are others, those who hold power and seem to become more focused, more calm, more exact in their movements. You can feel it when they enter the room. Not arrogance, but presence. Not loudness, but stillness. These people do not run from the shadow. They have studied it, integrated it, and so when power enters their life, it does not destroy them, it sharpens them. But you must understand, there is no safety in weakness. There is no virtue in powerlessness. Weakness does not protect you from corruption. It simply leaves you exposed to those who do understand power and have no interest in your well-being. The meek do not inherit the earth. The unconscious are devoured by it. What we call power in the modern world is often superficial. Popularity, money, applause. But the power I am speaking of, the one that creates monsters or legends, is something older. It is the same power that made warriors kneel before their own demons, that led saints into deserts to do battle with themselves, that pushed kings to madness or carved their names into time. It is inner power, the kind that demands self-awareness, not approval, that demands sacrifice, not comfort. If you are listening to this, you've felt it, haven't you? That quiet pressure building in you, the sense that you are not yet who you could be, that something fierce and formless is waiting beneath the surface. And yet, you hesitate, because you've been told to be nice, to stay safe, to dim your own light so others won't feel uncomfortable in the shadows. But power does not wait for permission. It does not care about comfort. It begins to rise the moment you stop lying to yourself. The moment you stop pretending you're not angry, not afraid, not ambitious. It demands that you look yourself in the mirror and ask the question most never dare to ask: what am I capable of if I stopped running from myself? And when you begin to answer that question, you don't just feel powerful, you become dangerous. Not to others, but to the parts of you that were keeping you small. The doubts, the guilt, the shame, those begin to fall away like dead skin, because power is not something given. It is something unlocked. And the key is buried in your own unconscious, among the shadows, the wounds, the rage you were taught to suppress. To find it, you must go inward. And when you do, there is something inside you that you've been avoiding. It speaks in moments of silence, in flashes of anger, in unexplained fear. You pretend it isn't there. You bury it beneath routines, smiles, distractions. But it watches. And one day, when power knocks on your door, it will rise, and it will ask for payment. This is not superstition. This is not myth. This is the shadow, the part of you've never been willing to confront. It holds your rage, your jealousy, your guilt, your lust, your wounds, all the traits you deemed unacceptable. They didn't disappear. They simply moved underground into your unconscious and began shaping your life from behind the curtain. Most people will live their entire existence with no understanding of this force within them, and that ignorance is not innocence. It is vulnerability, because the shadow is not passive. It influences your decisions, your emotions, your relationships. It sabotages your success. It whispers lies that sound like truth. It masks itself as humility when you're really afraid. It disguises itself as righteousness when you're hungry for control. You think you're making conscious choices. But when the shadow is unintegrated, it chooses for you. Now, imagine adding power to this equation. Imagine what happens when a person, unconscious of their own shadow, suddenly gains control, recognition, wealth, authority. Their inner chaos begins to spill outward. They begin to project, blaming others, manipulating, hurting, fearing betrayal in every glance, seeking enemies where there are none. And because they have power, they cause damage far beyond themselves. This is how monsters are born, not because they sought evil, but because they never faced the darkness inside them. They denied it. And what you deny owns you. What you refuse to look at becomes your master. The most dangerous man is not the one who is violent. It is the one who refuses to believe he could be. Because when the time comes, and power gives him the chance, he will unleash that violence in ways he doesn't even understand. Not just physically, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. He will justify his cruelty. He will wrap it in beautiful language. And he won't even see that the true enemy was inside him all along. The shadow cannot be destroyed, but it can be integrated. And this is what separates those who are destroyed by power from those who are transformed by it. To integrate your shadow means to bring awareness to the unconscious. It means to sit with the parts of yourself that frighten you, the parts that disgust you, the impulses that don't match the image you present to the world. It means to admit, yes, I am capable of harm. I am capable of deceit. I am capable of selfishness. Not to act on those things, but to own them. Because once you own them, they lose their grip. You are no longer haunted by what you hide. You become whole. And that wholeness is what makes you unshakable when power arrives. Not perfect, not saintly, but aware. Awareness is everything. When you become aware of your shadow, you stop reacting blindly. You stop projecting your wounds onto others. You stop seeking external enemies when the real war is internal. You become dangerous in the right way. Not because you seek domination, but because you no longer need validation. You carry your own darkness with grace. And because of that, you are no longer at the mercy of it. People will sense it. They won't be able to explain it, but they'll feel it when they speak to you. The stillness in your presence, the gravity in your silence. Because power without shadow integration is fragile, it trembles under pressure, it screams to be noticed. But power that has met the shadow, that the power whispers. And when it does, the world listens. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become all of yourself. Not just the light, not just the virtues and achievements, but the broken pieces, the raw emotion, the animal within. That's where your real strength is buried. Under the shame, under the masks, under the years of pretending. And the paradox is this: the more you face your inner darkness, the less control it has over you. The more you walk into it consciously, the more power you gain to shape it, instead of it shaping you. This is the inner war that determines everything. Not the one between you and the world, but the one within your own psyche. Between the persona you show and the truth you've hidden. Between the ideal you chase and the instinct you fear. The shadow does not want to ruin you. It wants to be seen. And if you refuse, it will still find a way to emerge. Through power, through ego, through chaos. But if you face it now, a man does not become a monster by accident, nor does it happen overnight. It is a slow erosion, a quiet build-up, what he has refused to face within himself. What he denies, what he buries, what he hides behind smiles and titles and routines. These things do not vanish. They grow teeth in the dark. You see it all the time. Men who seem kind until they snap. Leaders who preach morality until they crumble under scandal. Friends who wear masks so well you forget there's even a face beneath. Until something small, something trivial, tears that mask away. And what you see beneath it is not peace. It's fury, it's confusion. It's violence, sometimes emotional, sometimes worse. But the world looks this and says, he changed. No, he didn't change. He was always that man. He just couldn't hold the shadow back anymore. The shadow, that forgotten, disowned part of the psyche, is not content to remain silent. It watches, it waits, and when you keep pushing it down, locking it away, pretending it doesn't exist, it begins to seep through the cracks. First in small, unnoticeable ways. Passive aggression, subtle lies, manipulations, the little betrayals of one's own values. But then it escalates. Because repression has a cost, and when you spend your whole life trying to be only good, only pure, only harmless, you are building pressure in the soul that eventually demands release. And here is where the monster is born. Not from embracing darkness, but from running from it. Not from understanding the shadow, but from pretending you are above it. It is this delusion, this need to believe in one's own perfection, that sets the stage for the fall. Because when power arrives, when influence grows, the cracks widen, and the shadow, long denied, bursts forth with a hunger sharpened by years of neglect. That's why the most cruel men are often the ones who once tried hardest to be virtuous. Because they were lying to themselves. They built a false identity based on who they wanted to be, not who they truly were. They tried to kill the parts of themselves that were angry, selfish, lustful, bitter, and in doing so, gave those parts more power. The unconscious never forgets what you've locked away, and it always collects interest. Think of the preacher who condemns sin, yet secretly indulges it. Think of the politician who speaks of justice, but behind closed doors only for control. Think of the partner who promises love but punishes with silence, guilt and emotional warfare. These people are not rare. They are common, because most people live in terror of their own complexity. They want to be simple, clean, liked, but the human soul is not simple. It is layered, paradoxical, filled with contradictions. To be human is to carry both light and shadow. The problem begins when we choose to amputate the shadow instead of integrate it. Because what you cut off comes back to haunt you. It begins to leak into your words, your choices, your habits. You become reactive, you overcompensate, you start wars in the name of peace. You hurt people and convince yourself you're helping them. And worst of all, you believe your own illusion. The monster begins to walk wearing your face. And people won't always notice. In fact, the most dangerous monsters are charming. They smile. They use beautiful language. They wear expensive clothes. Because the shadow, when repressed long enough, becomes sophisticated. It learns how to survive in the world. It becomes clever, calculated. It learns your values so it can mimic them, not to uphold them, but to gain trust before betrayal. That is what happens when the shadow is locked away instead of faced. The monster isn't some external entity. It is not evil in the fairy tale sense. It is merely the part of you that was denied a voice. A child locked in a basement eventually becomes feral, not because it was born that way, but because it was ignored. And when that child returns, fully grown, fully bitter, it no longer wants to be accepted. It wants control. It wants revenge. It wants to prove that you were wrong to keep it chained. So the next time you see someone fall, someone who seemed stable, noble, admirable, don't assume it came out of nowhere. Don't say, he lost himself. More likely, he was never found to begin with. Because the monster does not appear in rebellion. The monster appears in repression. It feeds on denial. It grows in the shadows you never had the courage to name. And when the world finally hands you power, when your words begin to shape others, when your reach exceeds your own inner balance, that's when it steps forward. What separates the man who becomes a monster from the one who becomes a legend? It is not talent, not intelligence, not even morality. It is the ability and the willingness to face the shadow and integrate it, to bring what is unconscious into consciousness, to stop pretending that the dark doesn't exist and instead begin to work with it. The man who integrates his shadow does not become pure, he becomes whole. And it is from wholeness, not perfection, that true power is born. But this path is not glamorous. There are no cheers when you begin it. In fact, it often starts in silence, in isolation, in moments of despair, so deep wonder if you're even real anymore. Because the first thing that must die is your illusion. The version of yourself you carefully built to be acceptable, pleasing, in control. This persona has been your mask. It helped you fit in. It helped you survive. But it is not you, not fully. It is only the light half. The version you were taught to present to the world. But something inside you always knew there was more. You felt it, the emotion that comes uninvited, the thoughts that contradict your values, the urge to speak when you're supposed to stay quiet, the cold anger that simmers when you're told to smile. These aren't mistakes. These are signals, messages from the parts of you've buried. To integrate your shadow is to stop running from those messages. It is to sit down with your rage and ask what it's protecting. To sit with your envy and ask what it's trying to teach you. To hold your fear and ask what part of your soul it's still guarding. It is to begin a dialogue, not to let those parts rule you, but to finally listen. Because when you do, something extraordinary happens. What once felt chaotic begins to take shape. That raw energy, once destructive, becomes creative. The fire that used to burn bridges now fuels purpose. The emotion that once made you spiral becomes clarity. You do not become emotionless. You become centered. You begin to carry your darkness, not as a curse, but as a source of wisdom. This is where the legend begins. Not on the battlefield, not on the stage, but in the unseen realm of the psyche, where a man chooses to meet himself in full, where he no longer divides himself into good and bad, but becomes real. Dangerous, yes, but in the way a controlled flame is dangerous, not yet explosive, but powerful, focused, alive. The world responds differently to a man like this. He doesn't speak to impress. He doesn't move to prove. He doesn't seek attention because his power isn't borrowed from others. It rises from within. When he walks into a room, people don't feel his ego. They feel his presence. Because he has nothing to hide, and that makes him impossible to manipulate. You cannot blackmail a man who has faced his shame. You cannot bait a man who understands his own rage. You cannot seduce a man who has explored his own desires and isn't controlled by them. And this is precisely why integrated men are rare. Not because it's impossible, but because it's uncomfortable. It requires going into territory most people spend their whole lives avoiding. But here's the paradox. When you go there, when you walk into the places that hurt, that scare you, that challenge everything you thought about yourself, you don't become weak. You become unshakable. Not because you've conquered the darkness, but because you've claimed it. You've taken back the parts of your soul that were scattered by trauma, buried by shame, silenced by culture. And with every piece you reclaim, your power expands, not in a loud, showy way, not in theatrics, but in quiet authority. The legend is not the man who appears flawless. The legend is the man who is fully human and still chooses responsibility, who could dominate it but chooses discipline, who could destroy but chooses creation, not because he's repressed his darkness, but because he's integrated it. It listens to him now, it obeys, it fuels his purpose, not his chaos, and those who meet him can feel it. They don't know why they trust him, or fear him, or both, but they sense the weight of his journey. They recognize the difference between charisma and character, between imitation and authenticity, because a man who has met his shadow speaks from a depth most people don't even know exists. You do not become a legend by wearing armor made of ego. You become a legend by walking through fire with your soul exposed and coming out with your integrity intact. Not because you denied who you are, but because you finally accepted it all. There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet, invisible, but absolute, where neutrality dies. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't scream. It simply arrives, often when you least expect it. And when it does, you'll feel something inside you shift. The illusion that you can float in the middle, untouched by the extremes of the human soul, begins to fracture, and you realizing you cannot walk the edge forever. Power will not let you. This is the truth most people run from. They want strength without responsibility, confidence without self-confrontation, power without sacrifice, and so they live in the gray zone, never fully dark, never fully light, smiling when expected, hiding their rage in private, nodding in agreement while quietly suppressing their ambition. They tell themselves they are balanced, moderate, wise, but moderation is not always virtue. Sometimes it is paralysis. Power does not tolerate the halfway man. It will force you to decide. It will expose whether you're using it to control the world or to control yourself. It will either harden you into a tyrant or sharpen you into a force of clarity. There is no third path, because when power enters your life, whether through status, opportunity, influence, or deep self-knowledge, it puts pressure on everything unresolved inside you. It stretches your mask until it begins to tear. It brings the shadow closer to the surface. It magnifies your fear, your hunger, your loneliness. And if you are not prepared, you will mistake the discomfort for a sign that something has gone wrong, when in fact, it means something real has begun. The man who tries to stay neutral in this moment is not safe. He is in danger. Because power doesn't allow stalling. It wants direction. And if you don't give it one consciously, it will find one unconsciously. That's how the downward spiral begins. When you keep telling yourself, I'm not like them, I'm just doing my best, I'm staying in my lane, you believe you're avoiding extremes. But really, you're surrendering your fate to forces within you that you don't understand. You cannot escape the influence of power. You can only guide it, or be guided by it. The reason why so many men fail when they rise is not because they changed. It's because they never chose. They thought they could keep their hands clean while playing with fire. They thought they could use power without being transformed by it, but power always transforms. The question is whether you transform consciously or blindly. The conscious man says, I will use this power to build, not dominate. I will not pretend I'm immune to my own ego. I will look my shadow in the face and learn its language, so it cannot speak behind my back. He is not safe because he is weak. He is safe because he knows the beast within him, and it obeys his command. But the man who refuses to choose, who avoids that confrontation, lives in silent terror. Every time he steps forward, he doubts. Every time he speaks, he performs. Every time he acts, he fears judgment, because he knows deep down he never claimed authorship of his life. He never said, "This is who I am, and this is where I'm going." He let the world decide. He let others decide. He let his shadow decide. That is not neutrality. That is surrender. And surrender creates monsters just as surely as violence does. Because when you refuse to take responsibility for your own power, or something else will, your fear will take over. Your insecurity will whisper your next move. Your bitterness will guide your hand, and slowly, without realizing it, you become a creature of reaction, not creation. Legends are not born because they were destined. They are born because, at a certain point, they chose. They stopped floating between extremes and stepped with both feet into the fire. They understood that power will never leave you unchanged. And so they became the one who directs it, rather than the one it consumes. It is tempting to believe you can delay this decision, that you can stay in the middle forever. But the middle is not a stable ground. It's a temporary bridge, and eventually it collapses. The longer you wait to choose, the more that choice will be made for you. And it won't be a choice. It will be a fall into confusion, into resentment, into self-betrayal. Power is not patient. It will not wait for you to become perfect. But it demands that you become real, that you stop hiding behind ideals that you don't live, that you stop pretending weakness is virtue, that you stop looking for someone else to decide who you are. Because once power sees you hesitate, it begins shaping you. It begins testing you. And if you don't know who you are by then, it will show you, brutally, unmistakably, and without apology. You were never meant to remain unchanged. Power does not arrive gently. It does not knock politely and wait for permission. It enters like a storm, and in its wake, it reveals exactly who you are. It forces a confrontation between the face you show the world and the reality you've buried inside. And in that confrontation, something is forged. For some, what emerges is a monster, born of denial, repression, and unconscious hunger for control. But for a rare few, what emerges is a legend. A man who has faced the shadow and lived to tell the truth. A man who no longer hides behind illusions, but walks with clarity, weight, and quiet authority. There is no middle ground. Power demands a choice. You either let it possess you or you possess yourself. This path is not for the faint-hearted. It will ask everything of you, your comfort, your ego, your lies. But in return, it offers something priceless: wholeness, sovereignty, the kind of strength that cannot be faked, borrowed, or broken. So now the question is no longer if power will change you. It already is. The question is, will you become a tyrant to yourself or a master of it? Will you become a warning or a legend?